Since the title of our topic today is A Healing Journey, I should start by giving you a background of what I needed to heal from. In the 1950s, the CIA operated a mind control program called MKUltra. The New York Times first exposed this program in 1974, and a Senate committee investigated it shortly thereafter, headed by a famous Unitarian at that time, Senator Frank Church. Other government-led and journalistic investigations followed. Amongst other things, it was discovered that MKUltra program was used to perfect interrogation techniques, to create split personalities for covert espionage missions, and to experiment with drugs on both willing and unwilling subjects. Although MKUltra experimented predominantly on adults, it also experimented on kids in a program designed to create super soldiers and spies. I believe my sister, brother, and I were placed in that program during the summer of 1958. I was 4 years old, my sister was 8, and my brother was 2. We repressed these memories for 30 years, but in the 1980s, we began to recall our buried past. We had common memories of being kept in basement jail cells, subjected to electric shock, drugs, isolation, deprivation, psychological assault, and other traumas. What I learned later is that the idea behind these practices was to put the mind into a state of shock where it could then be reprogrammed. In its obsession to defeat communism, the CIA even recruited ex-Nazis to run aspects of this program, and it seems they tried to recreate a concentration camp atmosphere. They also wanted to mold individuals who would achieve high level of performance. In one experiment, I recall they asked me to draw as many squares as possible on a sheet of paper, and if I drew enough, I'd be handed a candy bar. If not, I'd be handed over to a monster. Although my siblings and I had common memories of these experiences, many of which we independently remembered, we struggled to believe such things actually happened. But then, in the 1990s, President Clinton released the results of a presidential advisory committee on human radiation experiments, which also included the mind control experiments conducted by the CIA. It included testimony regarding the experiments on children, and many of the common memories my sister, brother, and I recalled were identical to those included in that report. I should add that not just American kids were placed in this program, but Canadian, Mexican, and South American children as well. And in that regard, we received a benefit. We were exposed to another subject in the program, a teenage Mexican boy from a shamanic tribe who tried his best to protect us and comfort us during those terrible days. I believe the psychological damage inflicted upon my sister and me was significantly mitigated by the actions of that boy. Unfortunately, my brother, who was younger and more vulnerable, experienced lasting and more extensive psychological damage, typical of many other children who were in MKUltra. The question I most often get about this childhood experience is about my parents. Why did they allow this to occur? I did confront my father on this issue. In his natural voice, the one I knew, he denied knowledge. Then, suddenly, in another strange and whispery voice that I'd heard on rare occasions before, he displayed knowledge. As I mentioned earlier, one goal of MKUltra was to create split personalities. My father worked in the war crime staff of the U.S. Army after World War II, where he interviewed the Nazis at the Dachau concentration camp. That is where the Nazis conducted mind control experiments, and that is where the CIA recruited some mind control experts for MKUltra. I believe that is the connection that led us into this program. Now, for my healing journey, the most significant topic for today. Although I indicated that the loving presence of the Mexican boy limited the effect of this experience, I was none the less damaged. Before I embarked on my healing journey, I was terrified of authority figures, sometimes breaking into a stutter in their presence, and on rare occasions losing my capacity to speak altogether. I was convinced I would never have an intimate relationship. In fact, simple social interactions made me uneasy, causing me, during certain periods of my life, to become something of a loner. I had a streak of paranoia, frequently fearing the worst possible outcomes. I was driven by unknown, unconscious forces, such as an obsession to have a political career, which I later concluded was programmed into me. Then there was my overreactions to situations that I couldn't understand. I recall the night I watched the 1964 movie, The Manchurian Candidate. I totally freaked out. I couldn't sleep for the entire night without any idea why. Finally, it took enormous energy to keep such memories repressed, making concentration difficult, and at times kept me exhausted. So how did I heal? Well, I'm not fully healed yet, but I've made progress. I've used many approaches on this journey, and most of them have been useful. We are all unique individuals, and the path to healing can vary from person to person, but I'd like to share several approaches I found helpful. And I don't think some of these approaches are only useful for individuals who've experienced significant trauma. We all face stresses in our everyday lives, and sometimes we need help to carry us through. However, I'll start with one approach that is appropriate for significant traumas, and that is psychotherapy. I used it for a number of years, although I first remembered my traumas before seeking psychotherapy. The therapists were very helpful as I worked through these experiences, and they also worked with me using a vast array of healing modalities. One modality is hypnotherapy. There is a misconception that one does not have control under hypnotherapy, but I never found that to be the case. It simply puts you into a relaxed state, making it easier to get in touch with the issues troubling you. The version of hypnotherapy I like best is called journey work. That's where you travel back to a past experience, confront it, let out your feelings, offer forgiveness, then reinvent it if it happened in a different and better way. It's a bit like the visualization athletes use to improve performance. Other techniques I was introduced to included parch therapy and sand play. Sand play is a lot of fun. That's where you let your heart pick out items from a vast array of figurines, models, stones, and other articles and place them into a small sandbox to tell a story. Oftentimes, a story can help you make connections you might not otherwise see. Then there are techniques like EMDR, Reiki, and emotional freedom technique, often called EFT or tapping. EFT is based on Chinese acupressure and involves tapping on a set of energy meridians to remove both emotional and physical issues, to relieve them. I know that hiring a professional practitioner can cost money, but teaching practitioners often have interns who charge lesser amounts to work with their clients on these healing modalities. And the techniques like EFT can be found on the internet with video demonstrations at no charge. Inga and I also provide EFT seminars on occasion as part of the Restorative Practices program at this church. But then there's also a vast array of everyday activities that don't require a professional practitioner, which are cathartic and invaluable to supplement healing from traumatic issues and everyday tensions as well. In my last call to worship, I talked about how walking outdoors was an instrumental aid that helped me make it through the stresses of the everyday work week. When I was president of the Regional Parks Foundation, we funded a study for the Oakland Children's Hospital where they statistically proved that the anxiety level of children who spend at least 15 minutes outdoors in suburban parks several times a week had significantly lower anxiety levels than those children who did not. Then there's breath work, like Darlene just demonstrated at the Time for All Ages a little while ago. That can be a wonderful way to ease anxiety and stress from whatever the cause. Activities such as regular exercise, engaging in sports, meditation, music, dancing, yoga, creative writing, journaling, and socializing are all examples of ways to help mitigate tensions and/or supplement a healing journey. So new members and friends and visitors to our church may not be aware that MDUC offers a number of these and other activities that you can engage in with part of a group as part of our Restorative Practices program. One of the things that attracted Inga and I to join this faith and this church is the emphasis on acceptance of one another and encouragement of spiritual growth in multiple ways. So if you're interested, keep an eye out for Restorative Practices as they're advertised in the Beacon, This Week at MDUC, and Order of Service inserts. In these troubled times, such practices can help reinvigorate oneself for the important work we do as part of our church mission, be it social justice, pastoral care, teaching our youth, and other significant works of this church. Of course, there are many ways to reduce stress and/or heal from traumatic experiences, and whether you do it in a group or individually, it's important to pick out what really appeals to you, as well as trying new things that you may well come to love. What I discovered on my healing journey and my attempts to reduce everyday stress is oftentimes there is a resistance to doing these activities, even when you believe they can be useful. My first therapist helped me gain an insight into such resistance. At some level, I knew I might change for the better if I healed, but a part of me was attached to the way I was. It was a familiar room. I knew how to react, conditioned as I was. And to enter a new room, even if it's better, can be scary because it's unfamiliar. I knew the terrain of being a loner who minimized social interactions and had no plans of entering into a lasting relationship. Several things helped me break through that resistance, which has cropped up from time to time during my healing journey. Sometimes the pain of my current circumstances grew so great that it outweighed my fear of change. And when I did my work, I also had glimpses into how much better I felt as I healed from my traumas, which created a powerful motivation. Of course, when it comes to multi-layered traumas, I learned that persistence pays off. Early in my healing journey, I would give a healing modality I described earlier a one-time shot, and when I did not notice immediate improvement, I abandoned it. But then I came to realize it's a bit like going to the gym and working out once and then quitting because you didn't lose weight. Of course, sometimes the first-time use of a healing technique can produce immediate results, though I believe that is more likely to occur for a single-cause issue than for multi-layered ones. In the end, one part of the healing process is facing your fears and learning to react in different and better ways. So what insights have I gained from my childhood experience and my healing journey? One of the biggest is the power of the subconscious or unconscious mind. When your actions are driven by experiences you've repressed, you come to understand those hidden forces. I spent many years thinking I knew why I was terrified of authority, why I didn't want an intimate relationship, and why I wanted to go into politics to become president someday. But I didn't know the reasons at all. I often believed my terror of authority were justified, yet it was mostly in my head. I was simply projecting onto them the attributes of my MK Ultra tormentors. And once my memory blocks collapsed, I had individuals reporting to me, I sometimes noticed that they projected onto me qualities that had more to do with their relationship to authority in general than to me in particular. I also noticed that sometimes we project onto others shortcomings we may fail to recognize within ourselves. Another telltale sign I learned to watch for is overreactions to current situations, which had more to do with forgotten experiences or buried attitudes than what is occurring in the present. The key word is overreactions, like the time I watched The Manchurian Candidate. I'd watched plenty of movies far scarier than that one without hardly a flinch, so why did it terrify me so? Sometimes you need to look into yourself to understand what is driving an overreaction. That doesn't necessarily mean you have a repressed memory, but it could mean you may not fully recognize the forces shaping your attitudes and actions. And you may not understand the many forces shaping other people either. You may be puzzled why they don't see the world as you see it, or struggle with life situations you find easy to overcome, unaware of the powerful underlying forces and influences that could be shaping their attitudes and actions. Last but not least, I gain insights into how my unconscious mind might try to communicate. Creativity could be one way. Later in our childhoods, my sister, brother, and I loved to play a game where people were locked up in basements so that mad scientists could conduct crazy experiments on them. Based on my experiences, I don't think the subconscious mind forgets anything, and sometimes the only way it can communicate is through intuition and gut feel. There were certain objects I always had a visceral negative reaction to, and when my memory blocks collapsed, I understood why. In fact, those gut reactions then became clues to other repressed memories I was able to uncover. Of course, gut feel and intuition should always be balanced with the analytical mind. The rewards of my healing journey have been considerable. I've been able to do things I never thought possible. Most significantly, to have a long-term relationship with my wife, Inga. To become a father. To no longer live in terror of those things that reminded me of my hidden past. And to break free of programmed expectations, allowing me to become more of my authentic self. Although MKUltra ceased operations a long time ago, I learned from my experience, and this goes without saying, to be leery of government paranoia and overreactions, be it the anti-Japanese feelings of the 1940s, the anti-communist fears of the 1950s, and the anti-immigration paranoia of current times. Our government has proven itself to be capable of doing all kinds of unfortunate things. Yet on the other end of the spectrum is the power of love. The unconditional love the Mexican teenage boy showered on my siblings and myself had an enormous ripple effect on our lives. You can never tell what a profound effect acts of love toward people in need can have. In the end, it's the greatest gift we can give.